Thank you, Presiding Officer. In June 2021, the Scottish Government were told to retain messages relevant to their handling of the COVID pandemic. But 5 months later, the SNP introduced a policy to destroy WhatsApp messages. This is the digital equivalent of building a bonfire to torch the evidence. So, First Minister, why did the SNP bring in a policy to delete messages after they've been told to keep them?
First Minister.
First of all, of course, the policy being referred to by Douglas Ross is a general policy around messaging, mobile messaging, including informal messaging, such as WhatsApp. Of course, what is key when we got the advisory notices, both particularly from the Scottish inquiry, and then, of course, when we received information from the UK Government in relation to the UK inquiry, it was made very clear to officials, to civil servants, of course, to ministers, to cabinet secretaries, that any information that was relevant or could be potentially relevant to the inquiries should be retained and, of course, appropriately recorded within our record management system. That is why 14,000 WhatsApp messages are in the process of being handed over now that we have the Section 21 order. It's why 19,000 documents have already been submitted. It's why, when I submit my final statement, we'll have unredacted WhatsApp messages handed over to the inquiry. I should say, Presiding Officer, that is in very stark contrast to the Prime Minister, who tried to take the public inquiry to court, lost, of course, in the courts, and is still refusing to hand over his WhatsApp messages.
Douglas Ross.
People viewing this are listening to the First Minister to tell us what the Scottish Government are doing. And it is not up to Humza Yousaf or any SNP minister, current or former, to decide what is relevant to the inquiry, to pick and choose which messages are going to be handed over. Because it is absolutely clear that the SNP brought in an auto-delete policy, not just after being told not to do so by the UK COVID inquiry, but after Nicola Sturgeon had set up a separate Scottish inquiry. This policy was introduced 2 months later. Nicola Sturgeon went on television to say she couldn't withhold messages even if she wanted to. But this week it was reported that Nicola Sturgeon has deleted her WhatsApp messages. We know that destroying or withholding evidence from an inquiry is illegal. So does Humza Yousaf accept that if Nicola Sturgeon or any government minister has destroyed WhatsApp messages relevant to the inquiry, they would be breaking the law?
First Minister.
As Douglas Ross has mentioned, the former First Minister, let me just remind Douglas Ross and indeed the Chamber, in terms of accountability and transparency, Nicola Sturgeon stood up day after day, virtually every single day, did 250 media briefings,
Members.
70 parliamentary statements, and full accountability, full transparency, answering questions. They don't want to hear it, Presiding Officer, because, of course,
First Minister, if you might take a seat for a moment. We're not going to continue this session in this vein. Members are required to conduct themselves in an orderly manner. Let's treat one another with courtesy and respect, and let's not decide to contribute from our seats. First Minister.
And can I remind the opposition, particularly the Conservatives, when the former First Minister stood up, did those daily media briefings, spoke to the public, took questions from the media, it was the opposition that wanted to stop that from happening in the first place. Let me be absolutely clear. Let me be absolutely clear, because this is such an important issue.
First Minister,
particularly.
Mr Kerr, I must ask you to cease shouting from your seat. I'd be very grateful if you could comply. First Minister.
It is important, I think, that opposition members don't shout from a sedentary position, because there are members, families of those who have been bereaved by COVID who do want assurances. And I accept, and let me reiterate what the Deputy First Minister said a couple of days ago in this chamber. The Government does apologise to those families who are bereaved by COVID for any anxiety or distress that we have caused them. It was certainly not our intention. We received, of course, clarification from the COVID inquiry last week around their expectations. They have provided us with that Section 21 order. We are in the process of providing 14,000 WhatsApp messages, and on top of that, I will give my WhatsApp messages unredacted to the COVID inquiry, because we set up that inquiry for one reason and for one reason only: to get to the truth and to ensure answers are there for those families who suffered the most during COVID.
Douglas Ross.
I cannot believe that Humza Yousaf has just stood up and in the strongest possible way defended Nicola Sturgeon, who has been accused of deleting vital WhatsApp messages. And he didn't answer the question, would she have broken the law if she has done so? But the law is very clear. Deleting evidence required by an inquiry is a criminal offence. It's in writing in the Scottish COVID inquiry's letter. The SNP government were told to make sure that no material of potential relevance to the inquiry is destroyed, deleted or disposed of. It is an offence under Section 35 of the Inquiries Act. But the problem with the SNP's policy is the messages are deleted before the inquiry can judge if they're relevant or not. Humza Yousaf has previously told this chamber, and I quote, "Any material that's asked for will absolutely be handed over to the COVID inquiries and handed over in full." So why has the SNP government now failed to deliver on that promise by deleting evidence?
First Minister.
Douglas Ross continues to say that we are not handing over WhatsApp messages. That is incorrect. We are in the process of handing over 14,000 messages. On top of those 14,000 messages, when I submit my final statement, I'll be handing over many messages, not just with Cabinet Secretary, not just with ministers, of course with UK government ministers, with opposition politicians that I communicated with across the chamber, and I will be doing so unredacted, because we believe, this government believes, in accountability, very different to Douglas Ross's leader of the Conservative Party, who's refusing to hand that material over. And I understand why Douglas Ross wants to talk about process as opposed to substance. The reason why, of course, is because just in this week alone, we have seen utterly scathing, damning evidence about the UK government's handling or mishandling of the COVID pandemic. So, look, I am absolutely committed, and this government is absolutely committed, to being transparent, to being accountable, because we want the truth to be heard, not just by the public, but particularly by the families who are bereaved by COVID. We certainly don't have anything to fear from the truth. I suspect the Conservatives absolutely do.
Douglas Ross.
Humza Yousaf is all over the place with this. He starts off by saying he's going to hand over all the messages. Now he's saying he's going to hand over many of them. He doesn't hide from the truth. We don't know what the truth is, because messages have been deleted. And they've been deleted because of a policy of the SNP government. That policy means they can cherry-pick the information that the inquiry sees. Crucial discussions may have been destroyed by their auto-delete policy. Any uncomfortable information may be lost, never to see the light of day. This secretive approach treats the COVID inquiry and grieving families with contempt. Well, the Deputy First Minister is saying no, it doesn't. So, Shona Robeson, listen to Margaret Waterton, who lost her mother and her... Well, Jenny Gilruth, listen to someone who lost their mother and husband to the virus.
Ross, I'd be very grateful if members would give one another courtesy and respect. When a member is meant to be speaking in this chamber, let's listen to them. Mr Ross.
Senior government ministers within the SNP don't want to hear what grieving families think about their actions. So Margaret Waterton, who lost her mother and husband to the virus, said the news that the Scottish Government has withheld evidence from the COVID inquiry is, and I quote, frankly shameful. And Jane Morrison, a member of Scottish COVID Bereaved, said, if someone deliberately deleted stuff to avoid us getting to the truth, then morally and ethically, as well as legally, it's totally in the wrong. So does the First Minister regret letting down these families and so many others?
First Minister.
I think it's really important, because Douglas Ross has every right to ask the questions he is asking. We have a responsibility, I think, in this chamber to remember that there's many people who lost loved ones to COVID, including many people in this chamber, including members of my own government. And what I would say is reiterate the apology made by the Deputy First Minister to Scottish Scottish COVID bereaved, and indeed to their representatives, that we did not mean to cause them the anxiety that they clearly felt as a result of what was said at the COVID inquiry last week. That is on us, and we intend to make right with that, and that is why we will release those 14,000 messages, and I will release my own messages as well. So the absolute purpose of the inquiry is to get to the truth of the handling and where there were mistakes made, to learn from those mistakes. And ultimately, everybody will have an interest in that. Businesses across the country will have an interest in that, members of the public, but most particularly, most acutely, will be those families who have been bereaved by COVID. So I can give them an absolute assurance that we are here to cooperate fully with the inquiries. And let me just remind Douglas Ross what we already know about his party's mishandling of COVID. Those families who could not say goodbye to their loved ones, those families who had to attend funerals by themselves, without their family, without friends around them, they were doing that all the while the Conservatives were partying, breaking COVID rules in Number 10.
Briefly, First
Because
Minister.
we know the Conservatives, they don't believe that the rules, frankly, apply to them, and we have seen that in the evidence this week. So I can give an absolute commitment, Presiding Officer, that the Scottish Government will fully cooperate with both inquiries.